Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Selena Benavides, and today we're talking all about online learning, remote learning, and the best ways to support children and parents during this time. And I have a special guest speaker today, Jaime Carias, who works for USC.
Love that. We met as undergrads, and we each have paved our own career path, and life brought us back to reconnect. So excited, especially to have this conversation during this time. At the USC Annenberg School, I am the Civic Engagement Coordinator. I am also a fellow at the USC Annenberg Center for Third Space Thinking, and I'm the director of the USC Annenberg Youth Academy for Media and Civic Engagement.
Today is 1 year that we have done online remote learning, and it has been a journey. Everyone around the world has had to make adjustments. But it's been really difficult for families, especially if they're working full time and they also have to be helping to care for children, maybe different age children in the home, and thinking about how are they going to better equip their children to succeed in doing their academics online.
Right? Who would have thought 1 year ago we were sent home, and we were sent home with the concept or the idea that we were going home for 2 weeks. We were going home for 2 weeks and we were going to return April 1st. In a matter of a weekend, K through 12 schools had to transform their curriculums and their teaching methods from an in-person program to online overnight. They had to get creative, they had to be flexible and adaptable, and most importantly, they had to show empathy. It's affected our physical well-being, our emotional well-being, and our mental well-being. And I think those are three things that before the pandemic, maybe we were struggling in some way, shape, or form, but during the pandemic has really taken our toll on our youth and on our parents, especially for families that are living in very tight living quarters, especially for families that have to share devices, especially for families that lack reliable Wi-Fi. They've had to transform their homes into classrooms, into tutoring centers, into cafeterias, into counseling centers, into daycare centers, and anything that might pop up. And they've had to move furniture around. They've had to invest, and I use the word invest and not spend, because our families, many of them with the little savings that they've had, they've made a decision. I'm going to invest this and buy my child a desk if they could afford it, right? They've had to move stuff around. Some of them maybe have had to sell things to be able to buy educational equipment for their children. On the other hand, we also have to remember that our educational leaders are also experiencing that at home with their own children, with their partners. They're also having to transform places in their homes that traditionally were not offices.
Thank you. These are great points that again, the effort that families are willing to put in to make their spaces more suitable for their children to learn at home. And that we also have to have empathy and compassion, thinking about how it is for their teachers who are trying to teach when they also have a home dynamic that they're probably trying to manage at the same time. It really stresses the idea that this is a difficult time for everyone. And what I wanted to then transition to is thinking about what would you recommend that families can do right now to support their children?
We have Zoom marathons and we have Zoom fatigue. We have both ends. Zoom fatigue is Zoom burnout. And it's for real with our kids. I understand teachers want their kids with their cameras on. I get it. But also let's think about this logically. As human beings, we were not meant to look at cameras all day long. We weren't, right? And sometimes we forget to be able to do something as simple as stand up, move around, sometimes just even stretch, look up, move around. So one of the things that I'm telling parents is, buy simple Bluelight Glasses, $8, $9, $10, especially for little ones. They can make a difference because this helps protect your eyes, right? The other thing, I also have to make sure that I take off my contacts about twice a day to just re-wet them, because staring at a screen again, not healthy.
Thanks, Jaime, for sharing those points. I think you also brought up something that was really interesting to me, is the idea of being on the screen. We normally talk about screen time and limiting screen time with children. And then here we are in this online learning, online environment for children, and everything's on the screen. And instead of telling them to be taking breaks, we're pushing through and saying this is how the day is going to be structured. And I think what you're saying and what I'm hearing is that it's also important for children to be taking those breaks throughout the day.
Additional things that we could do to support our children during online learning is one, making sure that they have a stable chair to sit on. Sometimes we think about a chair, and of course, if you're able to, I remember when I first started working online remote, I was sitting in a kitchen hardwood chair and eventually started getting back pain. This concept of a routine. And if we look at a routine, kids have nutrition in the morning after a couple of periods, then they have lunch, and the little ones have another break in the afternoon. So again, if we're not moving kids around like they normally are, then that's also hindering their ability to think correctly, to focus.
I'm so glad that you mentioned about routines, because it's really important from a developmental perspective to be thinking about consistency. When children know what to expect and what's going to happen next, they're more likely to feel more relaxed, and that helps minimize some of their anxiety. I also have a video up on how to support kids during COVID if you want to get some more tips and resources. You could elaborate a little bit further about what can we do to support our parents? What can parents do to help themselves and their families during this difficult time? Because it's not only the children who are going through the online remote environment, but also parents.
Thank you. I think that's a great point, to be able to remember that not only are our students going through this, but the entire family. It's not just mom and dad, or mom and legal guardian and caregiver, but also whoever's living at home. It's one of the things that I like to recommend to schools and to parents is to create parent community groups on Zoom. Of course, we don't want different families mingling, but something like a parent community group on Zoom where we simply check in and how you doing? How's it going? What's been working for you? What hasn't been working for you? And if we're able to facilitate those parent community groups, where we do them once a week or once every 10 days or once every 2 weeks, and we bring parents from a site to talk in Spanish and English or their respective native language, you'll be able to hear what's working with some families or not. Because here's the thing that's been going on, at least in my work working with parents the last 10 plus years, is that a lot of parents feel, even pre-COVID, that they're in it alone. A lot of parents, and it's not because the schools aren't reaching out to them, but it's just naturally how instinctively a lot of parents think, especially once they start creating dialogue, once they start creating a safe space to talk, they realize that what X parent is feeling, they're going through, and they realize that this parent's tried this and it worked, this one didn't, and when we start sharing those dialogues, it's very important.
And I think that's a great point that you brought up about having space for parents to be able to check in with each other and communicate, whether it be through a Zoom community, a Facebook group, doing text messages or Slack messages, whatever platform you want to use to communicate, but having some type of closed space where the parents for a certain classroom or a certain grade level or a certain school can check in with each other and ask questions. I think that's a really useful way to be able to have other people who understand what's specifically going on with your child, and you can share that lived experience together. So I think that's a great tip. I also wanted to say, to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the idea of taking physical breaks and getting some physical movement in. I think that's a great thing for families to do as a whole, and to not only encourage children to do that, but also for parents to take a break with their children if they can. Because then they're engaging in physical movement, and we know that physical movement is really important for everyone's health, but it also allows parents to have a break from the screen as well, a break from the task of helping to manage the educational learning that's occurring, and to engage in something that's kind of fun and lighthearted with children. Another tip that I wanted to talk about is thinking about self-care for parents or caregivers, because it's really important that not only are we thinking about the mental, physical, and emotional well-being of our children, but thinking about how are we doing it.
We have to realize what our families have had to do.
We also have to be thinking about how we as schools, as programs, as educators, are better meeting their needs as well, to meet them halfway.
Jaime, thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
And if you'd like more information, you can go to my website at drselena.com. Also be sure to like and subscribe.